What if I told you the most accurate police show in television history was created by a man who was never a cop, but controlled every aspect of LAPD's public image? What if Jack Webb owned Dragnet so completely that the LAPD needed his permission to use their own badge numbers in other shows? What if the famous "just the facts" line was never actually said once in the entire series? What if I told you Webb fired his best friend and partner because the actor wanted equal pay? What if the monotone robotic delivery that made the show famous was carefully rehearsed to sound unrehearsed? What if Dragnet started on radio, and the television version was just Jack Webb reading the same scripts on camera? For decades, Dragnet defined how America saw police, and nobody realized one man controlled that entire narrative. These are 20 facts about the show that made cops into heroes and gave police unlimited power over their own story. Before we dive into video, please subscribe to our channel. Fact 1. Jack Webb created Dragnet to control police narrative. Jack Webb created Dragnet in 1949 as a radio show. He pitched it to NBC as authentic police procedural based on real cases. Webb was not a cop and had no law enforcement experience, but he was obsessed with police work and wanted to show it accurately. Webb went to the Los Angeles Police Department and made a deal. He would consult with them on every script. In exchange, the LAPD would give him access to real case files. The arrangement gave Webb authenticity and gave the LAPD control over their public image. Every script was approved by LAPD before filming. If the police did not like how they were portrayed, Webb changed it. Dragnet became LAPD propaganda disguised as entertainment. The show only showed police solving crimes and never showed corruption or brutality. Webb created a version of policing that was clean and heroic and completely false. Real police work was messy and often unjust. Dragnet ignored all of that. Fact 2. The famous "just the facts" line was never said. The most famous line associated with Dragnet is "just the facts, Mom." Everyone knows this phrase. Joe Friday supposedly said it constantly, but Jack Webb never actually said "just the facts" in any episode. The phrase does not exist in the show. What Friday actually said was "all we want are the facts, Mom," or "all we know are the facts." The shortened version "just the facts" became popular through parodies and impressions. Comedians mocked Dragnet using that phrase. The public assumed it was real. Jack Webb was furious about this. He hated that people misquoted his show. Webb spent years trying to correct the record. He did interviews explaining that Friday never said "just the facts." Nobody listened. The fake quote became more famous than anything actually in the show. Decades after Dragnet ended, people still believe Joe Friday said "just the facts, Mom." Fact 3. Jack Webb fired his best friend over money. Ben Alexander played Officer Frank Smith, Joe Friday's partner for the first 7 seasons. Alexander and Webb were friends before Dragnet. They worked together on radio shows. When Dragnet moved to television, Webb cast Alexander as his partner. The partnership worked perfectly. Friday and Smith had natural chemistry, but Alexander wanted more money. He asked Webb for equal pay since they were both leads. Webb refused. He said Dragnet was his show and Alexander was a supporting actor. Alexander pushed back. He hired a lawyer and threatened to quit. Webb was furious at what he saw as betrayal. He told Alexander he was replaceable. Webb fired Alexander after season 7. He replaced him with Harry Morgan playing Officer Bill Gannon. Webb and Alexander never spoke again. Their friendship ended over money. Alexander's career struggled after leaving Dragnet. Fact 4. The show started on radio and barely changed. Dragnet began as a radio show in 1949. It was enormously successful on radio for 3 years. In 1951, Webb moved Dragnet to television, but he did not really adapt it. Television Dragnet was basically the radio show with pictures. Webb used the same scripts, he used the same delivery, he even used some of the same actors. The visual element added almost nothing. Episodes were mostly people sitting in rooms talking. There was minimal action. Webb believed the words were what mattered. Television was just a new distribution method. This approach was boring to many viewers. Critics said Dragnet was radio with faces, but audiences loved it anyway. The show became a massive television hit. Webb proved you did not need visual storytelling to succeed on television. Fact 5. Jack Webb owned and controlled everything. Jack Webb was not just the star of Dragnet. He was the creator, producer, director, and owner. Webb controlled every aspect of the show. He wrote or approved every script. He directed most episodes. He cast every role. He edited every frame. Webb owned Mark VII Productions, which produced Dragnet. This meant he kept all profits from syndication. Webb became extremely wealthy from Dragnet. He made more money than almost any other television actor because he owned the show. Other actors received salaries. Webb received profits. This ownership gave him complete creative control. If Webb wanted to change something, nobody could stop him. The network could not overrule him. Sponsors could not demand changes. Webb answered to nobody. This absolute control was rare in 1950s television. Most shows were controlled by networks or sponsors. Fact 6. The monotone delivery was carefully rehearsed. Joe Friday spoke in a flat, emotionless monotone. Jack Webb delivered every line the same way. No inflection, no emotion, just facts. People assumed this was Webb's natural speaking voice. It was not. The monotone was a carefully crafted performance. Webb rehearsed for hours to make it sound unrehearsed. He wanted Friday to sound like a real cop. Webb believed real police officers did not show emotion on the job. They stayed professional and detached, so Friday spoke like a robot reading a report. This delivery became iconic. Impressionists mocked the monotone, comedians parodied it, but the style worked. The lack of emotion made the crimes more disturbing. When Friday described horrible things in a flat voice, it was chilling. Fact 7. Real lapped cases were used with permission. Every Dragnet episode was based on a real Los Angeles Police Department case. Jack Webb had access to actual case files. He would read through closed cases and find interesting ones. Webb would then adapt the case into a script. Names were changed, some details were altered, but the core story was real. This gave Dragnet authenticity other crime shows lacked. The cases felt real because they were real. But this arrangement came with conditions. The lapped had to approve every script. If the police looked bad, Webb had to rewrite. If the case showed police misconduct, it could not be used. The lapped essentially had veto power over content. This meant Dragnet only showed police in positive light. Real cases where cops made mistakes were never adapted. Real cases where cops broke the law were ignored. Dragnet used real cases but presented a false version of policing. The truth was filtered through lapped approval. What audiences saw was real crime but fake police work. Fact 8. Badge 714 became a cultural icon. Joe Friday wore badge number 714. This was a real lapped badge number. Jack Webb chose it because it belonged to a real detective. The number 714 became iconic through Dragnet. Kids wanted toy badge 714. The number appeared on merchandise. People recognized 714 as Dragnet's symbol. The lapped eventually retired badge 714 in honor of the show. No other officer was allowed to wear it. Badge 714 became more famous than most real police officers. The number meant something to millions of people. It represented justice and authority. Jack Webb made a badge number into a cultural symbol. Decades after Dragnet ended, people still recognized 714. The badge became bigger than the show. It was a perfect marketing symbol. Simple, recognizable, meaningful. Badge 714 proved that Jack Webb understood branding before anyone called it branding. Fact 9. Harry Morgan replaced Ben Alexander and stayed forever. Harry Morgan joined Dragnet in 1967 when the show was revived. He replaced Ben Alexander, who had been fired years earlier. Morgan played Officer Bill Gannon, Friday's new partner. Morgan was a veteran character actor with decades of experience. He brought warmth to the role. Gannon was more personable than Smith had been. Morgan and Webb had good chemistry. They worked together well. Morgan stayed with Dragnet until it ended in 1970. He then appeared in the Dragnet television movies in the 1980s. Morgan became more associated with Dragnet than Alexander ever was. People forgot Ben Alexander. They remembered Harry Morgan. Morgan later starred in MASH and became even more famous, but he always credited Dragnet with giving him steady work. Morgan and Webb became friends. Fact 10. The opening became the most famous in television. The Dragnet opening was simple and iconic. Dum da dum dum. Those 4 notes are instantly recognizable. Composer Walter Schumann created the theme. The music was ominous and official. It sounded like authority. The opening also featured the famous announcement. The story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. This framing told audiences they were watching real events. The combination of music and announcement created anticipation. Viewers knew they were getting authentic police work. The opening became so famous it was parodied constantly. Every cop show imitation used a version of Dum da Dum Dum. Fact 11. Webb worked 18-hour days and demanded the same from cast. Jack Webb was a workaholic who slept 4 hours a night. He arrived on set at 5 a.m. and left at midnight. Webb expected everyone else to match his schedule. Actors and crew worked 18-hour days. There were no breaks. Webb did not believe in stopping. He filmed multiple episodes per week. The pace was brutal. Cast members were exhausted constantly. Webb did not care about their comfort. He cared about efficiency. Dragnet filmed faster than any other show. Webb could produce an episode in 3 days. Other shows took a week. This saved money and allowed Webb to make more episodes, but it destroyed people. Actors burned out. Crew members quit. Webb replaced them and kept going. He had no sympathy for weakness. If you could not handle the schedule, you were fired. Webb believed hard work was the only virtue. He worked himself to death. Jack Webb died in 1982 at age 62 from a heart attack. Decades of 18-hour days killed him. Fact 12. The show made police heroes and changed public opinion. Before Dragnet, police were often portrayed as corrupt or incompetent. Crime movies showed cops as brutal or on the take. Dragnet changed that completely. The show portrayed police as noble public servants. Friday and his partners were honest, hard-working, and dedicated. They never took bribes. They never used excessive force. They solved crimes through patience and intelligence. This portrayal transformed how America saw police. Dragnet made cops into heroes, public opinion shifted, people trusted police more after watching Dragnet. The show created a positive image that police departments used for decades. Recruitment went up. Kids wanted to be cops. The Lapped credited Dragnet with improving their reputation. But this positive image was propaganda. Real police were not like Joe Friday. Real departments had corruption and racism and violence. Dragnet hid all of that. Jack Webb created a fantasy and sold it as reality. The fantasy was so appealing that people believed it. Dragnet gave police cultural power that protected them from scrutiny. Fact 13. Jack Webb created multiple spin-offs. Jack Webb used Dragnet's success to create other shows. He produced Adam 12 about patrol officers. He produced Emergency about paramedics. He produced The DA about prosecutors. All of these shows followed the Dragnet formula. Realistic cases, minimal emotion, competent professionals doing their jobs. Webb created an entire universe of law enforcement shows. They all presented the same vision. Police and first responders were heroes. The public should trust them. The shows were all successful. Webb became one of the most powerful producers in television. His mark VII Productions dominated the 1960s and 1970s. Every show made money. Every show supported law enforcement. Jack Webb built an empire selling one message: trust authority, respect police, do what you are told. The shows were entertaining propaganda. Millions watched and absorbed the message. Webb shaped American culture through television more than almost anyone. Fact 14. The revival in 1967 addressed the counterculture. Dragnet was revived in 1967 after being off the air for 8 years. The new version addressed 1960s counterculture. Episodes dealt with drugs and hippies and protests. Jack Webb was politically conservative. He hated the counterculture. The new Dragnet reflected his views. Friday lectured young people about responsibility. He condemned drug use. He dismissed anti-war protesters. The show became openly political. Many episodes were conservative propaganda. Friday represented traditional values. Criminals and hippies represented moral decay. The revival was less subtle than the original. Webb used the show to promote his political beliefs. Some viewers loved it, others found it preachy. The revival ran from 1967 to 1970. Ratings were solid but not spectacular. The show felt dated even when it was new. The world had changed, but Joe Friday had not. Jack Webb refused to adapt. The revival ended and Webb moved on to other projects. Fact 15. The closing statement became ritual. Every Dragnet episode ended the same way. The screen showed what happened to the criminal. The sentences were read aloud. Convicted of murder, sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole in 25 years. This closing statement was part of the show's formula. It provided closure. Justice was served. The criminal was punished. Audiences knew the ending before it came, but the ritual was satisfying. The closing proved that crime did not pay. Bad guys always lost. The system worked. This was propaganda, but effective propaganda. The closing statement reinforced faith in the justice system. Dragnet never showed criminals getting away. It never showed innocent people convicted. The system was portrayed as perfect. Real justice was messy and often failed. Dragnet presented an ideal that did not exist. The closing statement was the final lie in every episode. Fact 16. Webb refused to show police brutality. Jack Webb had a deal with the Lapped. He could use real cases if he never showed police misconduct. Webb agreed and honored that agreement completely. Dragnet never showed police brutality. It never showed corruption. It never showed racism. Police in Dragnet were always professional and restrained. This was completely unrealistic. Real Lapped officers in the 1950s and 1960s were often brutal. They beat suspects. They planted evidence. They discriminated against minorities. Webb knew this but refused to show it. He believed showing police misconduct would undermine public trust. Webb thought his job was to support police, not criticize them. This decision made Dragnet propaganda. The show presented a false version of policing. It hid the truth from viewers. Webb chose sides and sided with power. Dragnet made police look good even when they were bad. Fact 17. The show influenced real police procedures. Dragnet was so realistic that real police departments copied it. The Lapped adopted some of Webb's procedures. Other departments watched the show for training. Police academies showed Dragnet episodes. The show became a teaching tool. This was backwards. Television was influencing reality instead of the other way around. Jack Webb created procedures for dramatic purposes. Real cops adopted them because they looked professional. Dragnet shaped how police presented themselves. The professional, detached demeanor became standard. The focus on just the facts became policy. Police started acting like they were on Dragnet. This created a feedback loop. Webb imitated police. Police imitated Webb. The line between fiction and reality blurred. Dragnet stopped being a show about police. It became a template for police. Jack Webb accidentally created modern law enforcement culture. Fact 18. Webb made millions but died almost broke. Jack Webb became extremely wealthy from Dragnet and his other shows. He made millions from syndication and residuals. Webb owned his shows outright. The money should have lasted forever, but Webb spent everything. He lived extravagantly. He had multiple divorces. He made bad investments. Webb was generous with friends and family. He loaned money that was never repaid. By the 1980s, Webb was nearly broke. He owed back taxes. His assets were seized. Webb died in 1982 with very little money. The man who created a television empire died almost poor. His ex-wives fought over the small estate. Jack Webb made millions and kept nothing. The fortune disappeared. Webb worked himself to death for money he did not keep. The irony was brutal. Joe Friday represented discipline and restraint. Jack Webb had neither. The character was everything the man was not. Fact 19. The show is still in syndication worldwide. Dragnet ended in 1970 but never stopped airing. The show has been in continuous syndication for over 50 years. It airs in dozens of countries. New generations discover Dragnet constantly. The show feels dated but remains watchable. The simplicity works. The cases are still interesting. Joe Friday is still iconic. Dragnet influenced every police procedural that followed. Law and Order copied the formula. CSI copied the realism. Every cop show owes something to Dragnet. Jack Webb created a template that never died. The show keeps generating money decades after Webb died. His estate still receives residuals. Dragnet achieved immortality through repetition. The show will never go away. As long as people watch police procedurals, Dragnet will exist. Fact 20. Jack Webb shaped police culture forever. Jack Webb was not a cop, but he defined how police saw themselves. Dragnet created an image of professionalism and competence. Real officers wanted to be like Joe Friday. The show influenced generations of police. They joined because of Dragnet. They modeled their behavior on Friday. Webb created a cultural ideal that police still pursue, but the ideal was false. Joe Friday did not exist. Real police could not live up to the standard. But they kept trying. Dragnet gave police an identity, professional, emotionless, just the facts. This identity shaped how police interacted with the public. It shaped how they saw their role. Webb created modern police culture through television. One show changed an entire profession. Jack Webb was never a cop, but he made cops into what they are today.